really excited about our final speaker, Rizèl Scarlett. Rizèl has spoken before at a number of my events over the years. Always great. I don't think we've ever had this opportunity though to have like a fireside chat. So anyway, introducing Rizèl. Rizèl is a tech lead for open source developer relations at Block with diverse backgrounds spanning GitHub, startups, nonprofit organizations. She's cultivated a passion for utilizing emerging technologies to champion equity within the tech industry. She moonlights as an advisor to G Code House. I don't know how to pronounce the little squiggly, so I'm going to leave that out. An organization aimed at teaching women of color and non-binary of color to code. Rizèl believes in leveraging vulnerability, honesty, and kindness as a means to educate early career developers. We're thrilled to have you here for a fireside chat. Welcome, Rizèl.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here. Always like your events. They're like always really well done.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. It's mostly Potter, it's
Lots of
just
feedback.
kidding. Potter's the guy in the back doing all the video. Secretly, he's controlling all the strings. He reminds me not to be on mute when I get on screen. And not that I've ever done that. I don't know where he gets this idea, but I've never. Anyway, let's get to the topic at hand, which is basically so when you and I chatted, I would kind of pitch you the idea of that we are now in this world, which has come up multiple times throughout the course of today, where we are writing content that's not necessarily always being consumed by humans. I mean, it was always true that we had like, say, Googlebot or whatever search that was consuming our content. But in this case, it's not just being consumed by like AI bots, but it's also being regurgitated by those same bots in many cases. And so like thinking about like how do we approach this problem of like first of all, developers like if you want your stuff consumed by AI, like what's the best way to approach this? I know you had some thoughts even just in general. Like, I mean, what are some of your thoughts of like how should developers start to think about do they really need to think about like writing their content for AI?
Yeah, I think so because many times, like you just said, right? AI tools are starting to consume that content and regurgitate it. I actually was looking at a couple of stats and I found a report. I forget the name of it. I wish I remembered so that you guys will believe me and not think I'm making up. But it said like 55% of developers are asking AI tools questions over like actual like search engine optimize search engines like Google and stuff like that. And then that was in the US, and in the UK it's actually 62%. So I do think that like when you're creating content, we should be keeping like how AI tools are going to consume and then spit out that content for others, because that's where some people are starting to lean now, especially with some companies doing like AI mandates and stuff like that. Some people are starting to lean there. Even myself, I found myself like asking like ChatGPT or something like questions that I usually used to go to Google for. And I think the key here though is like don't forget that humans will still consume the content as well. Like I think sometimes maybe people are starting to be like, oh my gosh, AI first. I think we need to be able to have that balance of like, hey, AI tools will need to consume this, but also will like the average human being, because not everybody's using AI tools, and sometimes people want a deep dive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I've read something about, I think a lot of people have seen just kind of this traffic drop off for a lot of sites that kind of proves that yes, people are going to AI and getting their search. I mean, even if they go to Google, they're getting half the time, they're getting their answer from AI anyway. And it turns out they, by the way, almost never click the link to get the resource that the AI generated that off of. So like, I it's definitely, I think, something we have to take into account.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So one of the questions I had for you though, because I mean, obviously you all do a lot of AI stuff at Block. And how is the way an LLM consumes your content, say, different than how a human might consume the content?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, I think for the way we as humans consume content, we're like, we might skim stuff, we might go from spot to spot, even if it's a video. Like, whether you're reading or you're in a video, you might be like at 1 minute, and then you're like, let me just skip to 5 minutes. Like, I get the point. And then also, as humans, we're able to interpret nuance a lot. But LLMs are not that way, really. They kind of just like parse and like stitch together little chunks of information, and humans, we want like the storytelling, we want like a narrative arc, we want emotion. Like the LLM doesn't really care about that, to be honest. So I think the way that LLMs are looking for things, they're looking for like, or what helps them to find the point is like having like structured headings, like bullet points, numbered list, metadata, and stuff like that. So the LLM knows where to go to be able to answer the user's prompt. Because like, let's say I say, I don't know, sometimes I'm like, oh, can a baby eat this? Or I don't know, like I ask silly questions. And I'm sure now ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, they're like looking through some of the top ranked searches, and then they're like looking for like headings so they can quickly find the answer, and put it together in like a conversational manner for me.
Yeah, yeah, and some of those things are just good content structuring anyway. Like I
Yeah.
think sometimes we get away from say putting proper like headings in the proper order, which is just best practice anyway. But I think if you want it consumed, yeah, um, having those kind of things is definitely helpful. In fact, you may have missed it, but Kian was talking about how Cloudflare takes their markdown like with MDX, turn it into HTML and then turn it back into Markdown, but with
Oh,
a lot more of like this simplified versions of the Markdown, right? It's like so you won't have like a component for tabs, obviously, because it doesn't. But if you have a component, you just turn that into a list and things like that. So it gets at some of what your point here, which is like you have to change the way you put the content for an LLM. If you aren't doing their process and generating an LLM specific version.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh no, no, no. I was just agreeing with you that like it's not like hurting you to basically structure things better. It's you being more mindful, if anything. I even just really quickly, I was like even thinking about the fact that like adding alt text to your image helps the LLM, but in the end it also helps people who need to use like those like accessibility readers and all that. But keep going, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, it's true. Like, in some ways, it doesn't understand like say complicated like structure, but in some ways it also enforces you like on simpler things to have to do the best practices, right? Like add your alt text and which we've covered even was another presentation was like, adding alt text, adding accessibility things probably helps these as well. But what happens like let me ask you like let's say I don't want it consumed
Yeah.
by an LLM. Like, how do you do that? Because not everybody, you know, like if I have content that say is behind a login or something like that, and I don't want the LLM to ever have access to that stuff. What is there something I can do?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. However, I always do a disclaimer that it's not like guaranteed from the research that I've done, because it has to be that the LLM provider respects these boundaries. But like you can have LLMs.txt, a robots.txt, basically specifying like I don't want an LLM or AI agent to like consume this information. You could also, I think you had mentioned just now a login. Like I think if you put things behind like a authentication wall or a paywall, which I don't really like for humans, but those also help to guide the LLM from not like reviewing that information or consuming that information. But again, with that disclaimer that like not all LLM providers respect that. And I think in the future we're going to have to start thinking about like more like heavier technical standards, I guess, like licensing or Creative Commons or something like that, especially for folks like artists. I know artists don't want their like art being consumed by AI tools. So those are things that we might have to put in place as like AI continues to become bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Um, we I agree with you know, that respecting boundaries is always the part you can't. Some companies are much more respectful of boundaries than others. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. I do have a couple questions from the audience. First of all, Brian asks, are plain text LLM files the most easily consumed format for an LLM to learn from, or is semantic HTML a better format for more complex source content?
Double checking. Are you saying for it to avoid that information or for it to consume the information?
In this case, he's asking for it to consume. Like,
Oh, okay.
is it better to convert it into something like a plain text format, or is it better in semantic HTML?
From what I learned, semantic HTML, just because you have the ability to like have the headings and like do little indications that this is like the important information that you want, like a TLDR and stuff like that. So that's from my knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think like maybe if you did follow something like what was mentioned before about about converting to Markdown, because generally these LLMs understand that. I mean, we write in Markdown in the chat as an example, so I'm assuming that they would understand that better, but and it does have that kind of
That,
markup to, yeah,
yeah.
like the headings and things like that. Valeria mentions, I've heard that XML performs better than Markdown. I wonder if that's true. I have
I
no
didn't know
idea.
that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I haven't used
Yeah.
with an LLM like to consume that information.
Brian says, I wonder if ASCII doc would even be better than Markdown for more complex plain text source content. Actually, I wonder because I mean I've never really thought about like does what goes on under the covers, like how it breaks it down. Does it like I'm like if it's looking in an HTML document, I'm assuming at some level it strips out a lot of the HTML and does some kind of conversion to help it structure the content better. Um, but it doesn't mean, does that mean that their robots would actually like understand ASCII doc? I don't know
Yeah.
because it doesn't, I don't assume that they necessarily understand whatever format I want to write my text in. Curious, like, do you know anything about that at all?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this to be honest, but I would assume since it's trained on so many, like so much data, it should understand it. It's just more, I think it's less of the question of like, would it understand it or would it be better for it? I'm not sure to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah,
Because
that's
I
true.
know it would understand.
Yeah, I mean, it would understand the text, but would it understand like if you broke it down into different like the structure of the text any better? Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
no
know.
idea. That's a
Would it,
really good question. Or we'll have to we'll have to like leave that one. We'll have to research it for later. But very good question. Um, so yeah, actually, Forbidden 403 says I've read that Markdown format is actually most ideal to feed an LLM, but I would imagine that leans more towards text. Again, I guess we don't know. I'm not sure which is better. I never really heard specifically like if it's better to be in Markdown or it's better to be in text or it's better to be in HTML. Yeah, I don't. It sounds like you haven't really either.
Yeah, I'm not sure like which is better or not. I guess I've had better results with either Markdown and semantic HTML, but I haven't like sat there and like evaluated and been like this one is better. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's been like personal anecdote for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it gets to like the the point you were making earlier where the markup helps it understand like say the importance of certain elements, right? But ultimately like it's about how you serve up the information, right? It's not so much like um the structure is important, but it's not the most critical piece because it's gonna consume it, turn it into like tokens and spit it back in whatever format it sees fit. That's clearly different. If you ask it the same question twice, it's gonna give you two different answers, slightly. Um, so I don't know that you may be talking about like fine-grained differences in how it understands your content as opposed to like the actual meat of the content.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's important is like making sure, like again, like you have those hierarchies and stuff like that, but then you also like are leveraging like the metadata and like just making sure that like the LLM knows or has context about what everything is more than like, oh, I'm using this framework or this file type for the AI to consume it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so one thing I want to get at, like that you mentioned earlier about how humans care about the narrative, right? Like, I mean, if we're writing content, okay, so I guess let me take a step back and say so we have this kind of drop in where people are not coming to the source article. So I'm like writing my blog posts or whatever it is, but actually people might not be reading my blog post. People might be consuming my blog post via an LLM. But like when I'm writing, I'm focused on creating that narrative. Do we need to just change the way, like, what are your thoughts? Do we need to change the way we're writing? Because people aren't necessarily ever gonna aren't always reading the article. They're reading our article regurgitated by an LLM.
My perspective is I think we need to serve both audiences. I don't know, maybe other people won't agree with me, right? But I think all humans are nerds for different things. Like you might be like a car nerd or I don't know, a house cleaning nerd or whatever. So maybe not everyone's clicking your link anymore and there's been a drop. But the people who are really nerding out about whatever it is, they want that deep dive. They want the story before you actually write out your recipe. So you should still write for them in mind, but still structure your content in a way that an AI can quickly grab it and turn it into something conversational. So still structure it in a way that like it can be, I don't know what's the right word here, like Q&A like for the AI to pull from it. So I don't want to I think we should still keep AI in mind, but I don't want to eventually live in this world where like AI is creating the content and consuming the content and then we don't have any original like stories or anything because you could tell when something was developed by AI or only created for AI. It's just kind of like dry and uses a ton of big words and you're like what is this?
Yeah, totally. I won't name names, but there's sites I stopped going to because it was clear like the content you can spot an AI generated article very easily. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to read this. It's not entertaining to me. Like it's not fun to read. We do actually have a bunch of questions. I'm gonna get back to the questions here. Okay, so do Brian asked, do LLMs follow link image references in the text and parse those too?
Uh, what does that mean? Sorry.
I guess he's saying like so, and I think that they do. They follow links, like the bots that and the like say ChatGPT bot or all the different they follow the links in your
Oh,
content and
I was
consume all
saying
that stuff as
yes. I didn't know what I didn't know if like that's like one phrase link image reference, but I wasn't sure of that. But yeah, they do typically they'll go towards like the link and stuff like that. Is that what you're saying? Is that what that
yeah.
was? Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
he was saying link slash image. I should have made it clearer.
Oh, okay. Yes. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah, they typically do. Okay, so from what I learned is like similar to like SEO, the LLM will still like grab the um top ranking results, and then it will like quickly like grab important information from there. If there's a TLDR or a quick summary and like at the top or something like that, it'll grab that and bring that information to you. So it does follow them.
Okay. Let's see. Sarah asks, have you come across any content writing strategies for AI that would not also be good for humans? Everything I seem to find seems to be standard docs practices that we've been doing as tech writers.
Okay, wait, can you break that the question down for me? Is Sarah?
Basically, yeah, basically she's asking like, is, is there a reason you would want to write specifically for AI that would not necessarily be like follow best practices for writing for humans? Like
Hmm.
is there so far she's saying all the things that like how to write for AI is just use best practices we would use for writing for people anyway.
Hmm. I think I think I would agree with you, Sarah. I've come across that. I think that um the and I think this goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, right? Like these are just things that like we should be doing anyways. And they kind of just like enhance the experience or basically remind us like, oh, these are something that we should be doing for humans. I think if I'm answering this correctly, right? You were asking like, is is there anything differentiating from like how we write for humans versus I think those are still good best practices, whether we're like doing the hierarchical stuff or making sure we're clear, or using natural language. Like those are all stuff we should be doing anyways, but I think it's just almost like a good reminder that it will help the human and the AI. I hope I understood. There is one thing
Yeah.
I want to bring up though that like maybe
Yes.
people don't know about. Is there's this thing that I recently discovered called MCP UI. So I know everybody's like familiar with MCP. And the idea is that like we've moved into like as we can see, everybody is using like plain text for AI agents. And it's like all black and white. And this is like the new interface. Like people have like predicted like maybe this is the death of the browser, which is really sad because like web interactivity was so fun like back in the day. So they've implemented or two guys who used to work at Shopify have implemented this add-on on top of MCP, which basically allows you to bring in interactive components to your AI agent. So some of the demos they've done, I've done like my own thing, which was has been kind of cool, but some of the demos they've done is like, let's say you ask the AI agent like, oh, I want to buy a shirt or something like that, rather than it just coming back to you with plain text, it can bring in like an iframe with like a shopping cart, and you could press add to cart or whatever. Or it can bring back, it's either like pulling the iframe from like an external URL or you typing in your own HTML for it, and you can interact with the AI agent through that. So it's not just responding to you in text, it's responding to you in like the form of a UI, if that makes sense. And I've done it for myself. It's been kind of cool. I wanted to like, since I'm a new tech lead, I wanted to like see like where my team was with like getting their work done. And like the GitHub projects board, it's not like friendly for me to look at. I want to see it in more of a calendar view. So I'll like ask I like made this MCP server, and then I asked Goose like, oh, how who has the least amount of work, or what does the workload look like between my team and stuff like that. And then it'll like come back with like a bar graph or charts and all that. And I think that's like a cool new way that like we can be also thinking about framing our content so that like AI agents can consume that and bring it back or regurgitate it to users. So
Yeah, in fact, we saw a little bit of that like earlier today with like the search component that um, that was getting built in one of the earlier presentations. Joel Vardy was building, and where like he was sending back search results, but if you asked a specific question, it would actually send you back a form to fill
ooh,
out and things like that, right? Like, so I agree with you. It gets back to a point I was trying to make earlier, which is like content isn't just long form text, right? Like content is also like things like, oh, an interactive like calendar, right? That that shows you what your team members are doing and things like that. And so like it's, I think a lot of times we think of like the AI agents just consuming blog posts and docs and things like that, but they're all, I mean, there's all kinds of content that isn't just long form text. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, really good point. And then how do you serve that back up? Because like if you're in a chat text based like chat, like say with ChatGPT, it's got to be good at like, hey, I need to serve you up a component to actually interact with this type of content that isn't text easily converted to text based.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Yeah.
happy to answer more questions too. I just remembered, I'm like, wait, I did want to bring that up. But that's cool that like someone else was showing that off in a past session.
Yeah, it wasn't MCP UI specifically. I mean, it was in Algolia search results kind of thing that he was building in Next.js, but I think it's very similar basically similar concept. You know, and I mean, do you think like ultimately do you think are you what's your view in terms of the future of things like MCP? Because I think right now like it's like, oh hey, I integrate this in my coding tool and it helps me with code, but like it does a lot more. Like can you tell people like a little bit more about say how you've like what MCP is? I'm sure some people in the audience may not know. And then like do you see it as a way of consuming content in interacting with the LLM in the long run from like a content perspective?
Okay, so MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and this is basically a standard or shared agreement of how AI agents can connect to real world applications. Because without it, at this point in time, without it, you will have to make like your own custom integrations each time. When we first built Goose, that's what we were doing, and it was like a pain in the butt to be like, okay, I want to connect Goose to Jira, and then you have to like create your own like thing, and you can only do it in Python. I didn't know Python, it was so annoying. So, luckily, like Block went over to Anthropic, and they were like, yo, we want to make a standard, and Anthropic's like, we're already making that. So like Block was able to like give some of their like ideas or input into that along with other companies. So that's MCP. Basically, it's just a connector to real world apps. Do I see it as a way to, I think you said something about like,
Interact with content like because right now I think a lot of like MCP is like, oh, I'm use it for in coding. It most examples I see are around like generating code, but do you see that being more like
I
I
use
might actually consume content that via MCP servers?
I use it for everything. I know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't just use it for code. I know like because you can just make it for anything you want. I know Nick Taylor made like a dev.to MCP server. That's an
Yes.
example of like pulling in or using an MCP server to pull in like content. Like you can be like, hey, how's this going? Or I know I've seen people use a Reddit MCP server and they're like, tell me like the latest on Reddit. So you could really like have it if there's an MCP server for it, or if you want to make one, you can really have it just pull in like the latest news for the day or whatever it is you want to interact with content for you. I also know there's like, I guess if we want to talk about like documentation, there's I think it's called Git MCP, and it basically turns your documentation, I mean, turns your app into like document like a documentation type of MCP server, and you can just ask it like, how does Goose work, how does local stack work, what's happening here. So I guess that's a code example, but it's still like more content based where it's pulling stuff from like maybe your documentation site or your code base and helping you or helping the user figure out how to use it. There's just everything. I've seen like a Blender MCP server where people like they don't know how to like make those 3D assets, and like your MCP client just makes it for you. So it's, I think, at least for me, I tend to do more code examples out in public so people aren't like, oh, you're just using AI for fun. I'm like, no, I'm using it for code, but I often use it for non-code things.
Yeah.
I feel like
You know, Sarah mentioned actually that Astra has a like, and I remember that Astra has an MCP server for the docs. I think, I know like I've interacted with the AWS for consuming docs as well. But I always like, again, my experience with MCP, both building and using, has always been like inside my code editor and not so much like in chat. So like I hadn't really thought of it as a like content consumption in that kind of non like just oh tell me what's on Reddit kind of thing. So that's really interesting. So now we got to like think of that too in the way like do we so do you think like the way you would normally have in the past maybe provided a content API, do you think it's like if I would have provided an API to like access my content, should I had now have an MCP server to access that content? Do you think that's kind of becoming a necessity?
I think so. I think it's becoming a necessity. I don't know if MCP will be the de facto thing for the future years. I think it's like it's the starter, and I see so many companies adopting it. Like Apple is adopting it for their operating system. They like I seen an article about that. So I think if you have like an application or an API, I think it's valuable to have an MCP server for it, an official one, because probably someone in the community made one for your app anyways. So you can make an official one and allow people to access it through their AI agents.
Now, if I want to say take my content and make it accessible via MCP, do I have to then create my own RAG pipeline to train off of whatever my content is, and or is there another way, like an easy way that I could just, take my existing content and not have to, you know, like rework it in order to make it work?
I don't think you have to do the rag way. I mean, I think that's if you prefer that. But I know my boss, Angie Jones, she made a MCP server for our Goose documentation. And I don't think she did any of that. I think she just set up a couple of tool calls that probably said, like, give me like information on this, like read this part, create this, whatever like the tool calls needed to be. And then basically that's it. A user can ask that, it'll have the tool descriptions, and then you'll have like the tool calls that are actually like executing and handling all that. So I think brag is if you want to like go hard, but you don't need all that.
Okay. Yeah, let me see. I'm gonna check if we got more questions. Oh, somebody didn't know Blender has an MCP server. I didn't know either. I'm gonna be honest, like I feel like I'm a bit of a newbie with MCP, even though like it's I've used it, but not to the extent. I feel like there's a whole world of like stuff that I'm missing out on with MCP that like because I haven't really integrated it that heavily.
Yeah.
So yeah. What are your favorite MCP servers?
Ooh, okay. The Chrome DevTools just came out with one. I know as you said favorite, but I just tried it yesterday and it was pretty cool because it can basically debug my applications. Like I can be like, oh, I'm on localhost 3000, or I can be on like I'm on, I don't know, Goose. I mean, that's a bad example, like youtube.com. I don't know. And then I'll be like, oh, use the Chrome DevTools like MCP server to like figure out why like the performance is slow or whatever, and it could tell me and then it could like solve it. I thought that was great. I'm like amazing. I'm never using my brain again. Just kidding, I will, but it was pretty cool. Let me see. I'm gonna go to my extension list right now just to see. Because Block, we build a lot of our own MCP servers in-house
Hmm.
for like security purposes. So let me just make sure that I have I like Playwright. I like I like the Netlify MCP server because now I essentially just say like deploy it to here instead of like going into the application or console and having it deploy. There's literally so many that like I don't know why I'm not thinking of them right now, but like anything you think of, there's probably an MCP server for it. Um, Let me see. Hold on. I want to get you guys good ones. But while I think of them, you can ask me more questions if you wanted. Oh,
Just checking through the chat here. Oh, go for it.
oh, sorry. I like it. There's an 11 Labs MCP server, so you can do like your whole like text to voice speech thing. I think that one's cool. And then I also like this one. What's it called? Container use. It basically allows you to like put your AI agents in like a container and allow them to like work in isolation and in parallel, and that allows me to basically like test out different versions of things. Like this is a really simplified example, but if I'm like, how does this website look blue versus red, I can just have it like make two different containers and I just see the examples side by side, and it saves me a little bit of time. That's it.
It's really cool. We're building one like my team is building one. Um, and part of it was a lot of the stuff we do is like AWS CLI, and I found like AWS CLI like while it's powerful, like I forget. I mean, it's like AWS, uh, Lambda dash dash this dash dash that. Then you have to like let me format the payload correctly. Let me do this. And there's so many flags and things, and I never remember honestly. So I was like, can we just make it so like if you're like just do kind of like Netlify's, deploy this to there. Okay, create me a Lambda, name this. Now
Yeah.
send trigger this Lambda. Like, and I think interacting in that kind of straight text way is really how it's much more natural than, at least for me, like than remembering a ton of command line flags.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah,
powerful because it's like I think as developers sometimes we're like pride ourselves and like, oh, we remembered all this exact syntax. But I'm like, I think more the point is like you know that this exists and how to do it, but you don't remember, like it's okay if you don't remember that you had to do two dashes or or five, whatever.
yeah,
I think natural language method is great.
yeah. I think it is. And even if you think about it, like from a content standpoint, like I think our documentation we have like an AI that actually it's trained on our on specifically on the docs. One of the nice things I love about it is like we pay for a service that does this, but like one of the nice things I love about it is that it does not answer questions. Like if it finds some doesn't find the details in the docs, it's like I don't know. I don't have
Good.
an answer for that. Because one of the troubles is just when it guesses and it guesses wrong, you know.
Yeah.
Um yeah.
When it hallucinates or says,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And you're like, but I'm not absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it makes you feel good. That's the whole point. It's not really about doing that. No. But yeah, I saw something an article the other day that basically like it's that's I was it Anthropic or one of the companies had done a bunch of research and said it's just kind of eliminating that guessing is where it tends to go wrong. Is that what hallucinations is just it was trained they built the tools to always try and have an answer, and so when it doesn't it just guesses, and that's where like these hallucinations come from. Um, you know. So Sarah has one. I got couple. We think we have just a few minutes. I'm going to try and get to the last couple questions. Sarah, thank you so much for all your questions. Um, Sarah asks, how do you find support has changed? Maybe projects have fewer questions, but also more very confused people who've been told certain APIs exist that sound totally reasonable but don't.
Interesting. Okay, so we do in our documentation, we have like Inkeep, which like provides like AI responses. So I think sometimes we do get a few confused people, or sometimes people like they might ask Goose, like, how does this part work? But they may not have asked it well, and then Goose gives like a false answer. So I have seen that a couple times, but it hasn't been enough to bother me, but maybe that's because like my team itself, we do such good like technical support. So I'm not I've seen it, but it hasn't been like, oh man, this is awful for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, we haven't seen it either internally, but I'd be curious to ask our support team if they've gotten like questions that are wrong because AI is giving the wrong guidance. It's like I know myself, for instance, like I use in Cursor, like oftentimes specifically when I'm trying to build stuff in AWS, it gives me apps stuff that looks completely right, but is absolutely wrong. It's like, oh, that looks correct to me, and then I'm like, oh wait, no, that doesn't that doesn't exist in CDK. Like, what is it? It's making this up. So I wonder if people are getting support teams are getting more questions about that. Um, Sarah has one last question, and I think we're running out of time here. Um, do you have strategies for taking those experiences for figuring out what LLMs get wrong about your content and go back and revise?
Hmm. That's a good question. I wish I had like real strategies. I think it's more like right now it's just reactive for us. Like, oh wow, we didn't realize that people are getting confused and how to do XYZ. Let's write like a more like specific documentate like file like sorry, a more specific doc that like really explicitly outlines how to do this so people don't get confused. I think what has been happening. Like we have AI all over, internally and externally. And sometimes we have this bot called QAI that'll like pull the wrong information. But once we update the documentation to like be more explicit, it might pull it like two or three times the wrong way. And then after that, it gets it right. So it's not really like a tried and true strategy with like really proper formality, but that's just what's been working for us.
Yeah. I think like I'd say in my own experience, like adding to that is like so the tool I was mentioning we use for docs is called Kappa that does like it's basically like does the AI answers. And one of the thing I like about it that like is the part I think we couldn't build because we could build a RAG and like have it do this, answers or whatever, but like or whatever the solution is now if it's not a RAG. But we had built something like that, but then we ended up choosing this because it does actually tell you like here's questions that I couldn't answer. Here's questions that I was unsure of the answer. Like here's, which ones got thumbs down and things like that. And I think so just that analytics part of it and being able to say, like, to see what questions people were getting and were getting either poor answers or it couldn't answer based on the content that we had helps us to guide where we might have gaps that we can fill. Um, so like I think however, but unfortunately if you're doing even like say an MCP server or something like that, I don't necessarily have that data. This one is like all self-contained in our website, so I can get that data. But I don't know what questions people are asking via ChatGPT, but I think if you could get access to that and figure out like, okay, here's where it's going wrong. Um, here's where their questions are being answered incorrectly because it's consuming my content and serving up the wrong answer. Um, whether it's a tool like Kappa or something like that, it's helpful.
That's interesting. I think I'm going to try to implement that then. I think I could even do it with like an MCP server that we have. Like I
Yeah,
like
you
that.
think so?
I'm stuck on this. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you just have to have that data. Otherwise, like, yeah, without it,
You
you're
don't
flying
know.
blind anyway. You don't know where they went wrong because you don't know what answer it gave, so or what question they even asked and where it went wrong. So, um, well. This was a really fun conversation. I know it's like a broad topic, but in a very complex topic. And obviously, lots of people had lots of questions about it, and lots of thoughts about how to best structure content to be consumed by LLMs. I didn't know that would be the most the hottest topic. And unfortunately, hmm, I don't know. I don't really know. But um, yeah, I really appreciate the conversation. It's been great. Always good seeing you, Rizèl. And thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you for having me.